Okay, so today we're going to talk about the verbs in the simple present and basically how to use these verbs in Spanish. Okay, so let's talk about verbs. We know that a verb is an action word. So any of the following would be verbs. We have run, sit, eat, sing, swim, study. All of this, the word is telling us an action and therefore they're verbs. Okay, now in Spanish, we know this. All infinitives end in AR, ER, and IR. For example, on AR verb, we have hablar, which means to speak. ER verb would be comer, which means to eat. And an IR verb would be vivir, which means to live. Now, let's talk about something that in Spanish is called conjugaciones. Let's take the verb to talk, which in English, when you use the verb to talk, and let's say you want to use it with the pronoun I, we don't say I to talk. When we use it, we say I talk. Now this in English, you guys call it the subject-verb agreement. In Spanish, we call them conjugaciones. So when you look at the subject-verb agreement and you're using talk, you have I talk, you talk, he or she talks, we talk, you all talk, they talk. Now we do the same thing in Spanish, but in Spanish, every single pronoun has a different form. So let's look at it. So I have I talk, you talk, he, she talks, we talk, you all talk, they talk. So in English, you only have two different forms. And in Spanish, you have one for every pronoun. So if we take that same verb to talk, which in Spanish is hablar, you would have yo hablo, tú hablas, él o ella habla, nosotros hablamos, vosotros habláis, y ellos hablan. So if you look at it, each one of the pronouns had a different form. And that is what we call conjugations or conjugaciones. Okay, so before we start with these conjugaciones, let's talk a little bit about what los pronombres personales are, or the personal pronouns. And we talked about the subject pronouns before. So let's just do a little reminder. We have yo, which means I, tú and usted, which means you, él and ella, which means he and she, nosotros or nosotras, which means we, vosotros, vosotras, or ustedes, which means you all, ellos or ellas, which means they. Okay, so even though we've learned them like that and arranged them by their meaning, we're also right now going to group them in a different way. And we're going to group them different because when you conjugate, you have to group them by the form they use, a conjugation they're going to use. So yo will stay on its own, then we'll have tú on its own. Él, ella, and usted, they will share the same conjugation. Nosotros and nosotras will share the same conjugation. Vosotros and vosotras will share the conjugation. Ustedes and ellos and ellas will share the conjugation. So whenever we're going to conjugate a verb, we're going to group the personal pronouns this way. Now it's very important that we remember that this does not mean that the pronouns mean the same thing. Okay? It just means that they use the same conjugation. So we know that él means he, ella means she, and usted means you in the formal way. So even though the three of them use the same conjugation, each pronoun means a different thing. But we have to group them this way because they're going to use the same conjugation. Okay, so let's talk about how we conjugate AR verbs. So here are the steps. The first step is to drop the ending. So let's look at the verb hablar. We're going to drop the ending, which is AR, and it will just leave the stem, which is hablo. So this part, the HABL, is the stem. Okay, the second part is to add the correct ending according to the pronoun. So each one of those pronouns had a different ending, and that's what we're going to add to the stem. For yo, we're going to add o. For tú, we're going to add as. For él and usted and ella, we're going to add a. For nosotros or nosotras, we're going to use amos. Vosotros, we're going to use ais. Ellos and ustedes, they're going to share an. Okay, so this is the way it's going to look once we use it. We're going to use again that verb, hablar. We would have yo hablo. See the ending at the end? You have the O. Tú hablas. Él, usted habla. And ella is implying this one as well. So él, ella, and usted habla. Nosotros hablamos. Vosotros habláis. Ellos and ustedes hablan. So it's very simple, and all you have to do when you drop the ending is add the new ones. And these ones are the ones that you have to memorize. You're going to memorize o, as, a, amos, ais, an. You have to remember which pronoun uses which ending. And we're going to learn this as we use them. Okay, so let's look at another example. In this case, we're going to use saltar, which means to jump. And I want you to go ahead and write the pronouns as they're grouped. And remember that we are grouping them this way because they're going to use the same conjugation. And also, just so you guys know, even though I'm only putting all the masculines, the feminines are implied in the different ones. So for example, we have él and usted. Those two are masculines, but you can assume that ella also uses the same conjugation. For nosotros, it's implying there that nosotras uses it. Vosotros, it's implied that vosotras uses it as well. And ellos, ellas is also there. Okay? So now this time again, you're going to do it on your own. Remember, first step, drop the ending. And the second step is to add the correct one. Ready? So for yo, we would have salto. For tú, we would have saltas. El, usted, salta. Nosotros, saltamos. Vosotros, saltáis. Ellos, ustedes, saltan. So this is the way your verb would look. Okay? So, now you're on your own. You're doing this one on your own. And you're going to use cantar, which we've learned this, and it's to sing. Again, make sure you write the pronouns the way they're grouped, because you need to get practice on memorizing the way it's being grouped. Okay? So write them down first. And remember that the feminines are implied wherever they have to be. Okay, ready? Yo would be canto. Tú would be cantas. Él y usted would be canta. Nosotros would be cantamos. Vosotros cantáis. Ellos y ustedes cantan. Okay? So, there is a song to help you remember this, and I attached that to the message on the motto. And you also, guys, are going to be watching it today, and this is to help you remember the endings, the o, as, a, amos, ais, and an. Okay? So I hope the song helps you guys, and we will continue to practice this topic.